Hello and welcome to the Hub. I'm Wang Guan in Shanghai. Extreme heat waves, heavy rainfalls, and super typhoons are wreaking havoc in China and beyond. From academic discussions to real-life experiences, people worldwide are feeling the pinch. They're feeling the devastating impact of global warming and climate change. But amidst all these challenges, is there still hope for humanity to discover a climate solution? Will the year 2023 become a tipping point for more extreme heat waves and weather events, or pave the way towards a more sustainable future? Today, we're very happy to be joined by Petteri Taalas, the Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. Director General Taalas, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
We have a situation as we speak, record rainfall in Beijing, the very city that we live. 74.5 centimeters of rain was recorded in Changping district of Beijing. That is the heaviest rainfall in 140 years, believe it or not. And Beijing and its surrounding cities have been battling this record of flooding as we speak. Honestly, I don't remember seeing so much rain and raining for that long. And before this flooding, it was record heat waves. This year, Beijing experienced one of the hottest summers since 1961. 9 consecutive days of over 35 degrees Celsius, and a couple of days even over 40 degrees. What do you make of all these events? To what extent is all these due to climate change?
So without climate change, we wouldn't see so many these kind of extreme events. A year ago, you were having very hot and dry summer in China, and now you have also been breaking all-time high temperature record in western part of your country, and the recent flooding that you were exposed to is also we wouldn't observe such events so often without the impact of climate change. We shouldn't explain all of the weather variations with climate change, but I have been using analogy to sports. If you give a sports person some hormones, they can perform with even higher intensity. And we have been doing the same for atmosphere. We have been injecting more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, and that's why we have started seeing more often heat waves. We have started seeing more often flooding events and also sometimes drought. And in China, for example, you have been exposed to both drought and flooding during recent 2 years.
But how severe is this crisis that is unfolding right in front of our eyes, and how long do you expect this to continue? Because there have been a number of actions China has been taking very aggressively over the years to reduce carbon emission, even setting targets for carbon peaking. But are you saying that in the immediate future, we're still going to cope with these extreme weather events?
There's no return back to last century's climate anymore. And this negative trend in weather patterns, flooding events, storms, drought events and heat waves will continue until 2060s, independent of our success in climate mitigation. And we could phase out this negative trend in weather patterns in 2060s if we reduce the consumption of fossil fuels radically. That means we should get rid of coal, oil and natural gas, and of course China as the biggest emitter is one of the key players in this success. And unfortunately we have already lost the glacier melting game. We already have such high concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that the melting of glaciers will continue for the coming 1,000 years at least. And that means that, for example, most of the Himalayan glacier, which is giving water to many Chinese rivers, will disappear by the end of this century, and thereafter the big glaciers in Antarctica and Greenland will continue melting, and we will see sea level rise of the order of 0.5 meter to 1 meter per century, or even much higher if the melting of Antarctic glacier happens in a speedier manner. But we could stop this negative trend in weather patterns in 2060s, and we should do our utmost to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels. And China is one of the key players, and in your case, a reduction of consumption of coal as energy source is one of the critical things.
Director General Taalas, for everyday people living in Beijing, the residents there, what they're seeing is dozens of casualties resulting from the flooding this time around, damaged infrastructure, including bridges and buildings and hotels, disrupted workflow and life as we know it. What would be your advice to everyday people? What can they do to perhaps help reverse this trend or slow down this trend? And what can policymakers do in the municipality?
In our everyday life as citizens, we should stop using fossil-fueled cars. We should convert our transport system to be based on electric vehicles and also on biking, which used to be very common in China still some decades ago, and we have nowadays electric bikes, electric scooters, and so forth, and also public transportation is a good mean for that. And in our everyday diet, we should eat less beef, which is also producing methane emissions, and that's an issue. And then overall consumption is also an issue. The more we buy goods which are produced by using fossil energy, the worse it's for the atmosphere. And luckily, these means are now affordable, and we have growing amount of electric vehicles on the market, which is China is producing. Also, the solar and wind energy prices have been dropping under the prices of fossil energy, and also there China has played very important role. You have been helping us to reduce the prices of those technologies.
Also, a set of data that I would like to share with you and our audience. Extreme weather patterns in China, temperatures in Sanbao Township in Xinjiang's Turpan area, for example, reached 52.2 degrees Celsius, the highest recorded temperature in recent Chinese history, beating a previous record set in 2015 of 50.3 degrees Celsius. And also on January the 22nd, temperatures in Mohe, a city in northeastern China's Heilongjiang province bordering Russia, plunged to minus 53 degrees Celsius, according to local official data, smashing China's previous all-time low record of 52.3 degrees Celsius set in 1969. Any surprises for you, Mr. Director General? Did you see this coming?
So when WMO decided to establish IPCC to provide these scientific reports on status of climate, we were already able to show with fairly simple climate models that this is going to happen. And we have been following the track that we were modeling already in the 80s, 40 years ago, and so we can. So it's clear that we can simulate what's happening in atmosphere, and this was foreseen, but that time it wasn't visible in the eyes of ordinary people or governments, and that's why we have taken very slow action to mitigate climate change, to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels, and now it's high time to speed up our action to avoid worse things to happen.
Yeah, because we've also seen record temperatures, the hottest June, for example, in Europe, and in America, record high temperatures for July in many American cities. And this has really led to apocalyptic concerns and anxieties about global warming and climate change. Do you think we're still on track for the 2 degrees Celsius target set at the Paris Climate Accord?
Not yet. So, and in 2 years ago in Glasgow climate conference, the richest countries, G7 countries and European Union countries made commitments to keep us on this 1.5 degrees track, which would be the best future for mankind and biosphere. But unfortunately, countries like China, India, Indonesia, Brazil were not able to join that target, and of course the whole world expects that China would speed up your climate action, and that would be triggering also many other countries to join that. But we haven't lost this 1.5, which is really ambitious at the moment, and we should do utmost to keep us within 1.5 to 2 degrees targets, and there are high expectations for the forthcoming COP28 meeting that Arab Emirates will host in late November, early December this year that there would be new commitments, and we would very much expect to see such commitments from China.
For our viewers and also policymakers and city planners, can you perhaps flag some of the most pressing climate challenges right now, or the most alarming trends that demand immediate attention other than record highs and record lows in temperatures?
So the high temperatures have led to casualties. For example, last summer we got 61,000 casualties in Europe because of heat wave, and something very similar is most likely to happen this year as well. And then we have started seeing these extreme flooding events, as you have been experiencing in Beijing recently. And for example, last summer was extremely dry in Beijing, and you had difficulties with your water supply. And many of the impacts of climate change, they are felt through water. It's this drought, flooding, and also melting of glaciers. And in your case, the melting of Himalayan glaciers is going to be a long-term threat for the freshwater availability in many of your rivers. And that's the case also for India and several other populated South Asian countries. And then the sea level rise, which has been speeding up due to melting of glaciers, that's going to be a long-term threat for your coastal areas, and then we expect to see also more intense tropical storms, typhoons hitting your coastal areas.
Yeah. Director General, I want to talk about your background, academic background. From 1986 to 1999, you led the Ozone Research Unit of the current organization, World Meteorological Organization. In 2023, it is projected that the ozone layer will recover within 4 decades. You said at a meeting previously, and I quote, that ozone action sets a precedent for climate action. Our success in phasing out ozone-eating chemicals show us what we can and must be done as a matter of urgency to transition away from fossil fuels, reduce greenhouse gases, and so limit temperature increases. Given the successful efforts in recovering the ozone layer, what significance do you think these achievements hold for global climate action?
That's a demonstration that if there's a will, the countries can act very quickly. And for example, this ozone, this Montreal Protocol, which is protecting ozone layer, that was agreed in a very speedy manner and even based on very uncertain scientific know-how. And thanks to that, we have started seeing a slow recovery of the ozone layer. And the other problem that we have been able to solve by signing international agreements is acidification, especially in Europe. The acidification problem has been solved thanks to international agreements, and we expect to see something similar happening with climate change. We already have this Paris Agreement, but our dependence on fossil energy is so high that it hasn't been so easy to proceed. But now all these signs that we have seen with our own eyes should motivate us to speed up our action.
Yeah, we know that this is your second term as Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. Can you perhaps share with us what reforms or structural changes that have been implemented within your organization so far to adapt to the ever-changing landscape of climate challenges? And how do these changes position the WMO to better address current and future climate-related issues on a global scale?
Yes, so we have paid attention to climate science, we have paid attention to water resource management, and we have also paid attention to the observing systems and early warning services. And we have started communicating the facts of climate science, and that has been hopefully motivating the governments and private sector actors to proceed with the climate mitigation efforts. Then this availability of water is a big issue, and we have paid attention to the water resource issues. We have included private sector more in our work because private sector is also one of the big players in our field. And then we have a program called Early Warning Services for All. Only half of our 193 members have proper early warning services in place, which means that when high impact weather event hits a country, there are more human loss casualties and economic casualties losses as compared to countries where we can foresee high impact weather events couple of weeks ahead, and this El Nino La Nina variability half year ahead, and in tropical areas we can forecast the seasons fairly well. And this kind of means are very useful to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. And in countries like China, you are lucky to have very, very high level early warning services in place. You can avoid many of the damages, but of course you cannot 100% avoid them, but you can minimize the damages. But in less developed countries and in island states especially, they are not in such a position, and we have now a major program to improve the situation in those countries. And of course, this communication of climate science is also very important, and we are also the host agency of IPCC, which is providing major scientific reports on status of climate change and also means for mitigating climate change.
What about the susceptible or more susceptible countries to climate change? We've seen passionate pleas from Pacific Island countries, for example, and their young representatives at global conferences crying almost, pleading for climate action. What about the global south, on the other hand, who might not be the richest, but some of whom are the most susceptible to extreme weather patterns going forward?
The most expensive weather events have been hitting United States and China, but since your economies are fairly big, the biggest relative impacts are felt in less developed countries and island. For example, in Caribbean islands, there may have been GDP losses up to 800% in a single hurricane event, and same has been true for so many Pacific islands like Tonga or Vanuatu during recent years. So several hundreds of percents of their GDP has been lost during those events, and those are the most vulnerable countries when it comes to impacts of climate change. And of course, the key issue is to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels. But besides that, we have to pay attention to climate adaptation and take these risks into account in our infrastructures. But also these early warning services, proper early warning services are a very powerful way to adapt to climate change.
Yeah, Mr. Taalas, China has emerged as a prominent leader and player in building solar and wind capacity, for example. How do you envision China's role in furthering the global transition towards renewable energy? And what impact do you believe China's efforts in this field will have on fostering international cooperation and achieving or helping achieve sustainable development goals?
China has played major role in reducing the prices of solar and wind energy. Still, 20 years ago, these sources of energy were not attractive for the investors, but thanks to the efforts, especially in China, the prices of solar and wind energy have been dropping under the prices of fossil energy, and that's why many countries and many private sector companies are building more and more such energy. And you have also done great job in the prices of batteries and electric vehicles, and those are also needed to get rid of fossil fuels in transport systems. And of course, we expect that China would also show good example by reducing your own consumption of fossil fuels, especially reduce the consumption of coal as source of energy. But when I visited China last spring, I was positively surprised to see that large fraction of vehicles, for example, in Shanghai region, they are now electric vehicles, and that's very promising. But the same should happen also in the energy systems.
And then talking about China's Belt and Road Initiative, China announced that they will no longer build coal-fired power projects overseas. How do you foresee a Green Belt and Road Initiative, as has been pledged, contributing to the balance between economic growth on one hand, facilitation of trade, and also environmental protection?
It would be great that China would invest more and more in climate-friendly energy sources as part of the Belt and Road initiative, more investments in solar, wind, and hydropower production, and hopefully also in the future nuclear energy investments instead of investments in fossil sources of energy. That's my recommendation, and I'm happy that in China you have a company called GATECO, which is promoting investments in climate-friendly sources of energy.
We know that you're the former Director General of the Finnish Meteorological Institute, to have witnessed significant developments in your country's climate action. Notably, Finland set a commendable goal to achieve net zero emissions by 2035, with further aspirations to become carbon negative, based on principles of equality, of course. Maybe you can talk to us about the Finnish experience, the lessons as well as experiences, and what they can offer to the rest of the world.
Yes, I used to be a director general of the Finnish Meteorological Institute, but I was also a board member of a big energy company called Fortum, which has converted its fleet from coal-fired energy towards nuclear and hydropower production, and also they are very much promoting energy-saving solutions and how to enhance the energy efficiency. And actually, the European countries, United States, Singapore, and Japan have all been dropping their emissions, whereas at the same time their economies have been growing. And those countries have shown that there's not an automatic connection between GDP growth and emission growth. Actually, it has been the opposite. And the Finnish government has a goal to become a superpower of especially wind energy, and build produce more hydrogen, and build new systems around such technologies, and be also economically beneficial, which would be economically beneficial. So this green transition is not only an expenditure, but it's also a business opportunity.
With fluctuation in global prices, inflationary pressures, and also unemployment, and in some cases underemployment worldwide, are you having a harder time convincing policymakers and stakeholders to take climate actions at this point?
It has been shown that we would endanger the global economy if we fail with climate action. The World Economic Forum that meets every January in Switzerland, they are annually estimating which are the biggest risks for the global economy. And it has been demonstrated that for the coming 10 years, the biggest risk for global economy is failure of climate mitigation. So if we fail with climate mitigation, the costs would be very high, and that would be very harmful for the global economy. So it's viable to invest in climate-friendly technologies, and you will get the price back already in the coming decades. So that's a good investment also from that perspective. And I'm grateful for the government of China, where this perspective is often not only next year's GDP growth, but a little bit longer, and this kind of mind setup is needed also in the field of climate mitigation.
Director General Taalas, with the 2023 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP28, scheduled to take place in Dubai, the UAE, this December, what are your expectations and also your messages to the participants and stakeholders?
Of course, the key issue is that we have started seeing the impacts of climate change worldwide, and there's no more question whether there's climate change, and whether climate change is going to affect us human beings and global economies, and also the welfare of our planet. And now it's time to act and raise the ambition level of climate mitigation, and that's what is our expectation concerning COP28, that there would be new commitments made, and we also expect to see new commitments from China. If you could speed up the climate action so that you could join this 2050 carbon neutrality club that many countries have already done, and whether you could speed up the peak emission year, you could have the peaking of your emissions happening earlier than 2030, even during the coming 5 years or so. Those would be good news, and those would be also game changers to motivate many other countries like India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Brazil type of countries to join the club. So that's our expectation, and I'm sure that there will be also promotion of renewable energy sources, because Arab Emirates is host of IRENA, which is promoting use of renewable energy. So I'm slightly optimistic that we would see good news, and of course what the government of China says is also fairly critical.
Finally, do you want to say anything directly to the residents of Beijing, many of whom are battling this record rainfall and the flooding, and also the relatives of the casualties?
Of course, it's important to convince the policymakers to speed up climate action, and that would be also a good message from the citizens towards your government, and your government luckily has the means to be successful in climate mitigation, and that would be best for this generation, but especially for the welfare of the coming generations in China especially, but also worldwide.
Director General, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is my pleasure.
And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Shanghai. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you again next time.